Right now, we're paying attention to several tropical waves moving through the northern Atlantic. We have, of course, the remnants of Tropical Storm Cindy, which is located just to the south of Bermuda, which is struggling a bit right now thanks to strong wind shear. However, there is still that possibility it could re-intensify as it continues to head further northward. We also have another tropical wave that's expected to bring a strong amount of wind shear over the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, as well as portions of Dominican Republic, which could enhance the possibility of flash flooding. And moving a little bit further eastward, we have a tropical wave now coming off the West African coast, and there could maybe be that possibility it develops. However, it's unlikely at this time. However, it's good to keep in mind that despite the fact that this tropical wave may not develop, there still could easily be those next few tropical waves that could potentially have the possibility of developing, whether it's in the main development region or the Caribbean in the more long-term future. So make sure to stay tuned for more updates regarding the next few tropical waves coming off the West African coast. Here's a look at what the computer models are stating at this time. We, of course, have Tropical Storm Cindy, which has a decent amount of thunderstorm activity surrounding it. However, it's dealing with a strong amount of wind shear, which is definitely going to inhibit this storm's at least potential of developing into a tropical storm. And we do see moving forward with the forecast, we see that we could potentially see a more powerful low pressure system come off out of the remnants of Tropical Storm Cindy. However, I'll say that it's unlikely to be considered a tropical entity if this were to develop in this manner, because it would be over sea surface temperatures that are below the 80-degree threshold, which is necessary for most tropical cyclones to develop. Of course, there are some outliers, but it's very unlikely for a tropical storm to develop when the sea surface temperatures are below 80 degrees. Maybe this could be considered subtropical storm, but I believe that there's going to be just enough instability surrounding it that it won't necessarily be considered a tropical entity. It won't develop a close center of circulation to develop into a fully tropical entity, which is one of the requirements for a tropical storm to develop. So I don't expect this to necessarily be considered Tropical Storm Cindy once again if it were to develop into this manner. But even whether if it does or doesn't, it's likely going to stay off the coast, at least that portion of the entity, which will definitely be good news. However, there's still that possibility that the northern side of this low pressure system could still move northward and develop into a tropical storm just before it makes landfall somewhere along the southern Canadian coast. I'll say it's less likely at this point. It seems like the steering flow would promote this area of moisture to move northward thanks to a blocking ridge we're seeing right here. But I'll say due to the strong amount of wind shear, it's less likely at this point. Now moving into the more short-term future, we do see that the Caribbean should expect an enhanced amount of rainfall over the next several days thanks to a tropical wave moving through, where you could expect anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of rain over the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and Dominican Republic. Of course, flash flooding is certainly a possibility with this tropical wave, with some of the more impactful thunderstorms that would move through over the island. So you definitely want to be aware of that possibility over the next several days, as it should be very rainy for much of Thursday, even into Friday as well. The rain should move out of the Lesser Antilles by the Friday time frame, and I'll say right around the Saturday to Sunday time frame, that's when most of the rain associated with that tropical wave will move out, and portions of the moisture will move northward towards this low pressure system, and some portions will move a little bit further southward towards the Central American gyre we're seeing. So I'll say that by this weekend, conditions should dry up right over the Caribbean islands. Now, shifting our focus a little bit further eastward, we are going to see several tropical waves come off the West African coast, but there's very little chance that any of them will develop into anything of interest, thanks to the fact that the wind shear is quite strong over these storms, and they're located very far south. So it's going to be difficult for the Coriolis effect to have much of an impact when it comes to the storm's rotation, and the Coriolis effect needs to be strong enough for a tropical storm to develop, because if the Coriolis effect isn't strong enough, then we're going to see less rotation around the center of circulation, and that would force less convergence to occur, and that would weaken the storm in general if it were to move a little bit further southward. And that's what we're seeing right here. The moisture is just too far southward to be considered having a possibility of tropical storm development over the next several days and potentially even weeks. So, but still, we're gonna keep a close eye on the multiple troughs that will come off the West African coast over the next several weeks, because remember, any of them could still develop into a tropical entity in the more long-term future. So I'll keep you guys updated over the next several days. Here's a look at the wind shear map over the next several days, and we do see that much of the northern Atlantic is under a highly sheared environment, which is the reason why the remnants of Tropical Storm Cindy is unlikely to re-strengthen and redevelop as it approaches northern Canada. The wind shear will just be too much for the remnants to handle, and it takes time for an area of convective activity to develop a closed and well-defined center of circulation, and it's unlikely that the remnants of Tropical Storm Cindy will have enough time to redevelop. But still, in southern Canada, you still want to be aware of it. I wouldn't rule out any possibility during the hurricane season. Of course, computer models are far from correct most of the time, so I wouldn't rule out that possibility. And the only way we'd see the remnants of Tropical Storm Cindy develop is if it's able to avoid a lot of this wind shear that's expected to move through. So we're going to need to see this upper level low move a little bit further northward to allow more of an open area where the wind shear is very light. And even then, it's going to be very difficult for this storm to develop, because it's not going to be over 80-degree sea surf temperatures for very long, because right when it passes just to the north of Bermuda, that's when sea surf temperatures will fall below the 80-degree threshold. So it's going to be very difficult for this to re-intensify over sea surf temperatures that are below 80 degrees. It's still possible, but definitely more unlikely than not. And taking a look at the Caribbean, we do see that the strong wind shear is dominating as well. It's pretty much impossible that this tropical wave will develop with wind shear this strong and with the energy this spread out, which I'll show you guys in a sec in the relative humidity map in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And right over the main development region, we do see that there's a strong amount of wind shear as well that's going to continue to inhibit tropical cyclone development over the next several days. Here's a look at the relative humidity map. This is remnants of Cindy, and we do see that the energy becomes too dispersed for the energy to converge enough for this storm to have a close enough and a pressure that's low enough for a tropical storm to develop, because we do see the energy becomes very dispersed thanks to a trough moving through the northern portion of the United States, which will disperse the energy, spread it out a little bit too much for that energy to focus in on one area and enhance the wind speed. And that's what we're seeing right here, and same goes for this tropical wave right over the Caribbean. So that's suddenly going to inhibit this storm as it continues to try to head further northward. We could maybe see another low pressure system, but it's unlikely to develop into a tropical entity. Here's a 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center, and we still have that possibility it could develop into a tropical storm. The chance is rather low, but there's still that possibility. So southern Canada and maybe even New England, you at least want to be aware of this, because this could bring enhanced surf if this were to develop into a tropical storm, or enhanced rainfall right around southern Canada. Outside of the remnants of Tropical Storm Cindy, however, there's no the National Hurricane Center is stating that there's no area of that could potentially develop into a tropical storm within the next 7 days. This could easily change. We're going to need to wait and see. But based on what the computer models are stating, it seems like the hurricane season for now is starting to go back to sleep a little bit. But I'll keep you guys updated if there's any possibility of the next tropical storm developing. Here are what the spaghetti models are stating at this time. We do have some of the GFS ensemble members wanting to develop a low pressure system that could come close to tropical storm status, but it's just weak. It's just a little bit too weak to be considered that, so it's unlikely to develop. And we do have several ensemble members wanting to develop at least a low pressure system, but none of them really take it to tropical storm status, as it's unlikely that any tropical storm will develop within the next few days over the main development region. Here's a global tropics hazards outlook over the next few weeks. We do see for the week ending July 11th, there is an enhanced amount of rainfall expected right over the main development region, as well as portions of the northern Atlantic. And then we do see that the area of moisture becomes a little bit more enhanced by the time we approach the week of July 12th. So we're definitely going to need to be aware of that possibility, because any area where there's an above average amount of moisture always needs to be monitored during the hurricane season. And here's the amount of rainfall you should expect over the western Atlantic over the next several days. We do see that portions of the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, as well as the Dominican Republic should expect anywhere from 2 to 3 inches of rain. So you definitely want to be aware of that possibility, and be aware of the possibility of flash flooding as well up until the Saturday time frame. So here's my tropical update in general when it comes to the northern Atlantic. So Tropical Storm Cindy is unlikely to redevelop based on what I'm seeing, but southern Canada, still be aware of that possibility. We're going to need to see the wind shear become light enough for this to have a good possibility. And then for the Caribbean, expect heavy rainfall up until the Saturday to Sunday time frame, where you could expect 3 inches of rain and the potential of flash flooding. And then for future tropical cyclone development in the main development region, it's very unlikely in the near future, but I'll keep you guys updated if there's any changes with the possibility of tropical cyclone development. So make sure to stay tuned for more updates. But thank you guys for watching.